Welcome to Teaching Like Ted Lasso. I'm Dave Coffey.
I'm John Golden.
We're professors of mathematics at Grand Valley State University. So why make a podcast about another podcast about Ted Lasso?
Because there's pretty good ones already, right?
Yeah. There's a couple already that I listen to. We'll share those a little bit later. But we wanted this to be something a little bit different, right? So in the Math Teacher Lounge, at the very last episode, Dan Meyer challenged us to start thinking about this idea of how do we bring in other ideas into our teaching practice. And in particular, he mentioned these ideas about storytelling.
Yeah, and you and I have been talking about that for a long time.
Yeah.
And in particular with Ted Lasso, at one point you told me you weren't going to talk to me anymore until I was watching the show.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So why don't, if you were going to give a 1-2 sentence description of Ted Lasso, what would you say about it?
Oh, it's in our family we always talk about these like pitches, right? Mm-hmm. So it's a fish out of water story of an American football coach who, for the wordplay value alone, is going to coach football in England.
Okay, and by football in England, for our American listeners, that would be soccer,
yeah,
right?
So every time we get together to have one of these talks, it's not like we're going to be talking about a specific episode.
No.
Instead, we'll be picking one of these themes we've seen.
Right. One of the things that we think is good storytelling, right, is that themes run throughout the series and the different episodes and the different seasons. And so we thought maybe it might be repetitive to keep talking about some of these things that were coming up. So we're going to, and we've only seen the first 2 seasons. The next season comes out this fall.
As of time of recording.
As of time of recording, timestamp. But we felt like, again, given the kind of writing that they do, that there's a good chance that these themes will continue into the 3rd season, and we can see that. But so, what do you imagine this time is going to look like together?
Well, you had talked about 10 episodes, and nothing super long, so maybe 30 minutes an episode. And connect with the guests, talk about the topic, make connections to the show. Both of us, I feel like, on some level, are really about the connections. Yeah, and that's something that underlies a lot. Actually, that would make a pretty good theme to talk about.
Making connections, yeah.
But we want a conversational space to do that, and to join people, right? So it's not just us talking. We're very interested in what teachers have to say about it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we talked about collaboration, right? We don't want this just to be about us. We hope that an entire community sort of gets together and starts examining their practice, as again, the Math Teacher Lounge suggested, and thinking about, ways of growing, okay, recognizing that. I think, and I also think it's important that listeners and viewers recognize that we want to provide some space in between, right? So I imagine that maybe it'd be once a month. We also want season 3 to get up and going, so we can do that. So maybe starting in September.
So it's a reasonable pace for us and for listeners. Right?
Exactly.
Because you have other podcasts you're listening to.
Yep, exactly. So to that extent, we said this podcast isn't going to be a episode by episode breakdown. Right. A couple that I listen to, and we'll try to put this in the show notes. I never thought I'd say that, but I guess I'll figure out how to do that. But put in the show notes a couple that I'm listening to. One is Richmond Till We Die, which is just really focusing on the series itself, but also brings in some cultural stuff and has some guests. Really an interesting podcast. And the other one that I'm listening to is Lasso Lessons, and they're looking episode by episode and putting a spin about leadership and thinking about it in those terms.
Yeah, I haven't listened to that one at all, but the Richmond Till I Die is really, they get writers and performers from the show. They get people like Brene Brown on.
It's very nice. So between now and the next episode, let's try to shoot for September. What do you expect from our community? What are you hoping from our community?
Well, if you're somebody who's interested in Ted Lasso, just as entertainment even, would be interested in what kind of connections you make. What would you want to talk about as a guest or just as a community member contributing? What are some of the themes you see? What are the connections you've found between what you see on the show and what happens in your classroom?
Right.
And if you're a teacher who's not watching Ted Lasso,
watch it. Yeah. So here's my my Apple ID and password. You don't think that's a good idea?
I don't think that's a good idea.
DM me about it? It's still not a good idea.
Depending. The 3 people who watch this, maybe it would be okay.
All right. Well, it's worth, is it $4.99? We are getting no money from Apple. Believe me.
We're in fact paying Apple.
Yes, we are paying Apple.
For the privilege of doing this.
So if there's going to be spoilers, occasional spoilers, probably every episode. So it would probably be a good idea to spend some time getting caught up on the episodes. There's 10 in season 1 and 12 in season 2, and they go fast. They go too fast.
But even if you've just watched that first episode, it's an introduction to most of the major characters. Yeah. You find the premise of the show is out there.
Right.
There's a lot of stuff. I just rewatched it right before we.
What if you don't like football? What if you don't like sports?
I know nothing about soccer. Like graduate school intramurals. That's my experience of soccer. But it didn't phase my.
It's not really about soccer.
Yeah.
But we're hoping more of you will come along for the ride, and we're all smarter than any one of us. And if this makes you uncomfortable,
like Ted says in the first episode, when you're taking on a new challenge, it's like riding a horse. If you're comfortable, you're probably doing it wrong.
A special thanks to Joshua Davis for letting us use his music at the beginning and ending of this episode.
Man, I brought all my props and I forgot to use them.
But that's okay. Maybe next time.
Maybe next.